This time on Film Ranker, we are looking at Pixar. After 22 films, the digital animation studio has changed the face of animation for the better with its blend of complex scripts and technological advances. Without Pixar, we likely wouldn't have an Oscar for Best Animated Feature, an award the studio has won 10 times. This is probably going to be the hardest ranking I have done so far, as basically all of them are excellent, but let's take a look and count them down from worst to best. Cars 2. This feels like a straight-to-video sequel that was accidentally released in theaters. The first movie is thrown away and replaced by a James Bond ripoff with Mater at the center. It turns out Mater works a lot better in small doses. The slapstick action gets old early, and the whole will-they-make-up friendship angle with McQueen never feels in doubt. Number 21. Brave. Brave would have been just fine as DreamWorks or Disney movie, but it never really reaches the lofty expectations set by Pixar. It's not bad, it's just a bit too simple. The beginning takes a bit too long, and the middle doesn't have enough to it. It also probably doesn't help that it's all people. Well, people and bears, which, other than a couple of notable exceptions, isn't really Pixar's sweet spot. Number 20. The Good Dinosaur. This one isn't as bad as the delays and under-the-radar release would have you believe. It was more a victim of timing than anything, being bumped so that the admittedly better Inside Out could break Pixar's rough streak. It's classic Pixar, characters trying to get back to their families and learning about themselves along the way. The obstacles feel a little bit less organic and not all the comedy works, but it certainly has its cute moments, and who doesn't like dinosaurs? Number 19, Toy Story 4. The biggest strike against the fourth Toy Story film is that it is not necessary. It's got some good bits. The Bo Peep Woody romance works, and as a Canadian, I am legally obliged to love Duke Kaboom, but all of it feels like busy work of an unnecessary epilogue. Calling it a cash grab's probably a bit too much, but the trilogy works a lot better without it. Number 18, Monsters University. I love a classic nerds versus preppy film more than just about everybody, and I actually like the heart of the Monsters, Inc. prequel just fine. The competition is interesting, and Mike and Scully's rocky path to friendship actually feels believable, but it is missing that Pixar sense of wonder, or the one big hook, or the whatever it is that makes us cry at so many of these cartoons. But it's a fun time filler. Number 17, Cars 3. A return to form after the not-so-good choices of the second film. The third Cars is weirdly the only one in the series that is actually about racing. It's kind of a take on the later Rocky movies. Lightning is older and slower, even if it feels like that happened way too quickly, and he needs to pass the baton and step into the shoes of HUD. It's not as deep as some Pixar movies, but it's a classic sports movie in all the best ways. Number 16, Finding Dory. Smartly switches the roles on Finding Nemo, this time having a child searching for her lost parents. Dory shows that she is capable of carrying her own movie, and the new cast of friends is mostly pretty fun, especially Hank the Octopus. And that fake out followed by the reunion has a solid impact. Problem is that things get a little bit too increasingly unlikely throughout, leading to that ludicrous final scene. Number 15, A Bug's Life. The second Pixar film mashes an Aesop fable with a twist on the Yojimbo fistful of dollars recipes and then adds an outcast hero. It maybe hasn't aged as well as some of the now classic Pixar films, but it does have charm and legitimate laughs and tension. Heinrich and Tuck and Roll are real standouts, as is the voice acting of Kids in the Hall's Dave Foley. Number 14, Cars. Okay, so it is true that Cars is basically a ripoff of the Michael J. Fox film Doc Hollywood, but if you're gonna remake something, it's not a bad place to steal from. Also, this world populated entirely by vehicles makes for some weirdly compelling scenes, made even more so by the voice acting of the incomparable Paul Newman, and the very comparable but shockingly good in his role Larry the Cable Guy. It's a simple movie, but it works. Number 13, Onward. Doesn't totally feel like a Pixar film, but that's not always a bad thing. It feels like the studio is stretching more than it's settling. The celebration of all things D&D does have a lot of Pixar staples. It's a classic hero's journey, focuses on reuniting a family, and it has some of those classic memorable side characters, not the least of whom is a pair of pants. Number 12, Incredibles 2. Classic superhero sequel. More heroes, more action, more time to play around with everything that was set up in the first. It maybe does have a bit less in the way of emotional connection, and the villain doesn't work quite as well as the original, but it's great watching Bob as the stay-at-home dad, and Violet gets a real nice story arc. Number 11, Toy Story 2. A lot has been made about the fast-tracked production and last-second script writing, and honestly, it's amazing that the film turned out as cohesive as it did. It's a tight rescue story that takes the action out of the toy box and puts it into the world. Jessie is a terrific addition, and both Woody and Buzz get to grow in meaningful ways. Doesn't quite hit those high points of some of the other films, but it's a solid ride from top to bottom. Number 10, Monsters Incorporated. Monsters Inc. let us know that Pixar wasn't afraid to shake things up. It makes us take a few very big leaps right out of the gate, but everything's laid out with minimal exposition. Just, it's a world with monsters and they live on children's screams. Don't worry about it. And we don't, because the monsters are fully formed in a way that makes sense, and the child is one of the most adorable characters ever. And weirdly, we relate to all of it. Number 9, Toy Story 3. A perfect end to what was at the time the Toy Story trilogy. On the surface, the third Toy Story is a riff on the classic Great Escape formula, but really it's a movie about growing up, both for Andy and Woody. There are some great scenes, both action and comedy, with some really nice additions, particularly Michael Keaton's Ken and Timothy Dalton as Mr. Pricklepants. But the bit you remember will be that terrific closing scene of Andy passing along the toys to Bonnie. It's a perfect, heartfelt end to a fantastic journey. Number 8, Up. Yes, the first half hour is the high point, absolutely, but how good is that first half hour? And once we get to South America, it's still good. Russell's great, Doug is adorable, and the sinister villain is plenty sinister. It just isn't game-changing, though honestly, would you even be able to deal with a whole movie that kept up the emotion of that opening chunk? And when we get that later glimpse of Ellie's addition to the adventure book, it makes for the perfect emotional bookend. Number 7, The Incredibles. There was no Marvel Cinematic Universe or Dark Knight when The Incredibles arrived on the scene. At the time that The Incredibles was released, it was one of the very few times we had seen a superhero movie that actually met our expectations. It has plenty of action and cool gadgets and an awesome evil island, but mostly it takes its characters seriously. Ironically, it took an animated superhero film to finally stop treating comic book characters like cartoons. Number 6, Coco. A wonderfully neon ode to the importance of tradition. Coco is an inviting walk through the land of the dead, led by the always terrific Gael Garcia Bernal. The twist is maybe a bit too telegraphed, but it's satisfying nonetheless, and the music is maybe the best of any Pixar film. And there are more than a few moments of real emotion, including the tearjerker duet with Mama Coco. Number 5, Inside Out. After a bit of a rough stretch, Inside Out was a much-needed return to the heights of Pixar quality. It's the highest concept film from the studio, known for high concept, an existential journey set inside the mind about growing up and embracing the bittersweetness of life. It could have easily fall in the way of Hallmark movies, but it stays smart and engaging and sometimes legitimately heartbreaking. R.I.P. Bing Bong. Number 4, Ratatouille. This is Pixar's art house film, and certainly its most adult. Ratatouille has a terrific message about the importance of creating and following your passion. Most of the specifics will go way over kids' heads, but how cool is it that they're left in there? Remy is a quirky take on the lovable, relatable outcast. The critic is a classic villain in his own refined way, but the real star is that specificity, the real love of the art, not just of creating the perfect dish, but of creating a film that gets it all just so, and it really does. Number 3, Finding Nemo. The genius in Finding Nemo is that it chooses to focus on the parent. Think about that. In a movie made for kids, the filmmakers choose the viewpoint of the worried but caring single father. It's a phenomenal quest with no end of entertaining stops along the way, but it never panders, not even with Dory, who gets a few of her own moments of real emotion. It epitomizes the importance of talking up to kids. Number 2, Toy Story. The first Toy Story movie changed the game. It was an enormous jump in both technology and storytelling that sparked a boost in animated films that is still echoed today. It's the perfect blend of new and old. Nostalgia meets the future in both narrative and in style. But most of all, it's a perfect window into childhood. Number 1, WALL-E. WALL-E is the greatest animated film ever made, and one of the greatest films ever made, period. The first 30 minutes are pure old-time Hollywood gold. It's basically introducing kids to Chaplin and Broadway, but at the same time, it's incredibly contemporary with its message. Perhaps even more amazing is that once we get the big move into space, everything that was built in that first chunk is held onto. WALL-E's innocence is never sold out, nor is his love for Eva. It is a film that wears its heart all over its sleeve, and we can't help but get swept up in its magic. And that's it. I know that someone out there will love every single one of these 22 films, and an argument can be made for a lot of things to be moved way up. So please share your faves and maybe like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you all next time.